Hi everyone, it's Kelly here. Welcome to my channel if this is your first time. Welcome back if you've been before. Lovely to have you either way. So as I said, my name's Kelly. On this channel we talk books, and today I'm recording a wrap-up of my reading in April. It is now more than halfway through the month of May. I have had a crazy couple of weeks. You will have seen potentially, if you're following along at home, that it was a month between videos, and that was not because I hadn't recorded anything. It was because I hadn't had 5 seconds to edit anything. So I'd had 2 videos that I'd recorded, and anyway, it happened. We took a month off. It wasn't intentional. It just happened that way. So we're back on track now, recording now. I'm actually at home sick today, and I've been, I'm feeling dizzy. I've got funny stuff going on in my ears today. Anyway, it's not COVID. I did a test. What can you do? You just got to rest and let your body repair itself. Anyway, I am home. So I thought, what better time than now to finally record this video, so that I can hopefully have it up for you, and I can share my thoughts on these books that I read such a long time ago now that I'm probably going to have difficulty remembering exactly what I thought about them. Thank goodness for my trusty journal. Otherwise, what would I do? Okay, also, I only have 3 books to show you, but I've read more than 3 books. That's because a lot of them I've either had to return to the library or I read them on audiobook and do not have a physical copy. So it is what it is. All right, so let's get straight into it and start with probably, I think, the highest rated book that I read in the month of April. Yep, I did. Okay, it was the first one. We started off well, and that was All That's Left Unsaid by Tracey, Lien. This is a book I gave 4.25 stars to. I loved it. I read this book because it is on the Stella Prize shortlist. At this point, the Stella Prize winner has been announced, and it was one that I was not expecting at all. It wasn't even in my top 3. So yeah, very surprised by the winner, which was the Jaguar. I'll link up in the cards the video where I gave my review of that book. But yeah, was very surprised, especially given how good All That's Left Unsaid was, that was the winner. Anyway, it is what it is. The judges are the judges, and they make the decisions they make, and that's okay. So let me tell you about this book. So this is a book that sort of seems as though, in terms of the premise, that it's going to be really heavy, and it is to a degree. It's about a teenager being brutally murdered, and so his name is Kai. I think that's how you pronounce it, Kai. I should remember because I listened to this on audiobook. Might have been Key. I think it's Kai. Anyway, that's not the person who's murdered. That's the sister who is the narrator of the story. Denny Tran is the name of the teenager who is murdered. And his sister, Kai, or Key, is determined to find out how, why, and by whom. And unfortunately, because of the situation in which she is, so their family is Vietnamese Australian. Their parents came out as refugees to Australia, and they live in a community that has a lot of other people in the same situation, where we've got Vietnamese refugees making a home for themselves in Australia. And this book is really about the next generation. So either people who came out as children or who were born here in Australia, and what life is like for them. That's essentially, I think, the core of this book. But it starts off with this murder, and we don't know, and it's one of those things that is slowly revealed as the book goes on, what happened to Denny. He is a good kid. He's a kid who does well at school. He tries really hard. He is well liked, you know, so there shouldn't be any reason for him to be murdered. You know, it doesn't seem as though he's the kind of person who would get himself murdered. So what's happened, we sort of slowly, this is revealed to us. And it's really a complex untangling. So there's a discussion of trauma, you know, the trauma of being a refugee and being the children of refugees, and also how far Australia has to go to become what it thinks it already is. It's really a really poignant story, and I loved it. I thought it was brilliant. I would not be surprised if this one is in the long list for the Miles Franklin that's going to be announced very soon, and I hope it is, because the fact that this didn't win the Stella is mind-blowing to me, because this was by far, I think, the best contender in the Stella. So it is what it is, but yeah, looking forward to hearing the long list of the Miles Franklin and hoping that this one's going to be on it. 4.25 stars from me. All right, so then the next one was also a Stella Prize shortlister that I loved, and that is We Come With This Place by Debra Dank. I gave this one 4 stars. It's had to go back to the library, unfortunately, so I don't have it to hold up, but you will have seen I've popped it on the screen for you. So this was also really poignant, very powerful. Debra Dank writes, with a quiet strength and wisdom, is what I've written in my journal. There's some hard stuff that is covered. She doesn't shy away from that. But she also sort of has this sort of humour to her writing, and her connection with country, she comes across very confident in herself and in her connection, which was amazing. So as you can potentially gather from what I'm talking about, Debra Dank is an Australian Aboriginal First Nations author, and this is a memoir of sorts, I would say. So the thing about the Stella Prize is that it has lots of different genres that can be included and are eligible for entry. So it includes poetry, it includes novels, and it includes memoirs. So and also graphic novels can be included in there, lots and lots of different sort of things. So it's a really interesting prize in that way, because it sort of brings together this group of books that don't really seem like they go together, and I can't imagine how difficult that is to judge as a prize, because they are also different. But We Come With This Place was just a brilliant book, definitely about connection to country. It was absolutely beautiful and I loved it. So that was in my top 3 also. Okay, next one, and this I think was the other one that was in my, oh no, it wasn't in my top 3, because there's another one coming up later, but this was very close to being in my top 3. If I was having a top 4 of the 6, this would be in it as well. So that is Indelible City Indelible City, Dispossession and Defiance in Hong Kong by Louisa Lien. This one I gave 3.75 stars to. It was really good. I would say the only thing that sort of, I don't know if it let it down or if it just sort of, it didn't quite meet my expectations of what I was hoping to get out of this book was, the author, Louisa Lien, has a background in journalism, and she, I believe, if my memory serves me correctly, she worked for the BBC for a while, and sometimes I listened to this on audiobook, which was a good choice because it worked very well on audiobook. However, sometimes it came across like long form journalism that just kind of went on and on and on, instead of coming across sort of as cohesively as I would have liked. There was also a bit of repetition in there. It sort of at times felt like there were different essays or different journalistic pieces that had been written and then kind of put together in terms of some of the themes that she keeps coming back to, and also some of the people that she talked about. So that's the downsides. The upsides, and I would very much recommend that you read this book, because I learned so much about Hong Kong. I think Hong Kong I've known about and it was sort of on the periphery of my knowledge. I knew a few things about Hong Kong. I knew that it was handed over from British to Chinese Control back in the 90s, and I knew maybe a couple of other little things about it, but other than that, my knowledge was sorely lacking, and this book really filled the hole of my knowledge about Hong Kong. So it also felt like a really important work. I learned about the history, I learned about the politics, and some of the colourful characters of Hong Kong, and what it sort of means to be a Hong Konger, and how life has changed, and also the threat that is that the Hong Kong people are currently under. And yeah, so it was a really, really important book, and I really encourage people to seek it out, because you will learn so much about Hong Kong from it. The audiobook was narrated by the author, and yeah, as I say, it sounded a little bit like a very long newscast at times, but it was really, really good. So yeah, highly recommend Indelible City. The next one I did not like. So this was also from the Stella Prize, and it was Big Beautiful Female Theory by Eloise Grills. Okay, listen. I wanted to like this book so much. So this was not exactly, I wouldn't exactly call it a graphic novel. It was illustrated. The author's artworks were included in it, as well as sort of writing. It was sort of a bit of a mixed media, I guess you could call it like a mixed media piece that was on this shortlist. I don't know why it made it to the shortlist, because quite frankly I found it really pretentious. It felt like self-flagellation for the sake of art, and it didn't work cohesively, in my opinion, as a collection of essays. Also, I didn't like the art. I thought that the art was not good. And I know that art is subjective, and, you know, that is just my opinion, and I'm sure that there are other people who do think it's good. But in my opinion, it was not good. And I did not like this collection at all. I gave it 1 star. And I don't often give 1-star reviews to books, because generally speaking, there aren't that many that are 1 star, in my opinion. This just, yeah, it was terrible. And I don't know why it was like, especially when you look at the books that it was with, I have no idea why. And there were books that didn't make it onto the shortlist from the long list that were good. So I don't know what's going on. Very, very strange. Okay, so let's move on. The less said about that, the better. All right, moving on. Now I do have a book to show you, finally. Yay. And that is Cleopatra and Frankenstein by Coco Mellors. I have been at this book for a long, long time, and finally I finished it. So it was a 3.25 stars from me. It felt like it was going to be quirky at the outset, which I like. I like a quirky book. I like quirky characters. I like good banter that's kind of like a bit edgy. However, it just ended up feeling a bit pretentious by the end instead, which was a shame. And that was unfortunate. I'm really glad to now have this off my currently reading pile, because it has been sitting on my currently reading pile for such a long time. And the reason is I just haven't felt the desire to go back to it, which is a shame, because I really wanted to like this book a lot, and I only just liked it a bit. So there were things that were really good about it, but yeah, it wasn't what I was hoping for, unfortunately. So that was a shame. The next one that I've got to tell you about is a book that I listened to on audiobooks. Again, I don't have a copy of, and that is Children of Paradise by Camilla Grudova. This one was on the Women's Prize long list. And I picked it up because 1, it was short, 2, I was able to get an audiobook version of it, and 3, some people in a book clubby group that I'm in were reading it, so I thought I'd join in as a buddy read, because I had a short audiobook to listen to. I was puzzling while I was doing it, which was good fun. So Children of Paradise is sort of a book about the cinema, and maybe that should have been my indication that it wasn't going to be the book for me, because I don't really watch a lot of movies anymore, and I certainly am not like a movie person in the sense of this book, because this was sort of came across like as a love letter to cinema and to cinemas, because it's set in a sort of dilapidated old school cinema that's kind of clinging to its status as an old school cinema, and it's sort of the progress happens. They get bought out by a big company, a big cinema company, and kind of become a bland nothingness, which is the way of all things, I guess. But, and so from that point of view, I could appreciate the story a little bit. There were also, but the bit that I didn't get was all of the cinematic references, because I've not seen pretty much in fact, probably any of the movies that were referenced in this book, because I'm not a big cinema person. So, so obviously those references went over my head entirely. I think if you were a cinema person, you probably would get a lot more out of this book than I did. So, I reserve my judgment in that sense, because that's not me. And if it's you, then maybe this book is really, really great for you. The characters in this book are really unlikable. There's not a good character in here in the sense of likable character in there. The other thing that was kind of weird about it was that there was a lot of gross bodily fluid stuff, like all the bodily fluids, like all of them. And it was to the point where it was a lot. And, every time it would come up, you'd be like, come on. I don't want to read about this. I don't want to hear about all of these things. They're gross. Like, it's okay if it's, every now and again, but it just felt relentless. So, yeah, I don't know. It wasn't that great for me. I've written meh as a comment here in my journal about it. I ended up giving it 2.5 stars. It wasn't absolutely dreadful. There was some sort of good interplay between some of the characters, but they weren't particularly well drawn, I would say. They weren't sort of rich characters. In the end, they were hard to kind of tell apart other than by their quirks. And even then, it was just difficult to kind of keep track of them, unfortunately. So, it wasn't really for me, unfortunately. All right, and the last one I have to show you from the month of April is Bad Art Mother by Edwina Preston. This was another one that was on the shortlist. Now, initially, when I was looking at the long list before the shortlist had been announced, I borrowed this from the library, and then I had read the first little bit of it, and I liked it, but I didn't like it as much as some of the other ones that I was starting. I sort of wanted to kind of get a feel for them and then decide which ones I was going to proceed with. And this was one I initially decided I wasn't going to proceed with, because it was like, it's okay, but it's not as exciting as some of the other ones, especially like All That's Left Unsaid and We Come With This Place. Like, those were kind of pulling me straight away. However, when it was announced for the shortlist, I went back to the library and re-borrowed it, because I had to return it because someone else had reserved it, and blah, 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 blah. It was a whole long saga to get this book back, but I've got it now. I've finished it, and I really liked it. It ended up being really, really good. So the Bad Art Mother is a mother who is sort of, sorry, excuse me while I just readjust myself. Oh, I'm sorry. I've bumped you. I need to move my legs because I'm starting to get a little bit numb. There we go. That's a bit better. Anyway, the Bad Art Mother is a mother who is a poet, in that sense, an artist, and she is somewhat neglectful of her child, and her bond with her child is a little bit off, I think. And partly she kind of comes across as the kind of person who probably shouldn't have had children, because it really wasn't for her. Like it, but it's set in the past. So it's, because we're hearing from the adult child. And it also comes across that the mother is sort of having some mental health challenges at a time when it's not really something that people were conscious of or sensitive about when people were having difficulty. So yeah, I think in that sense it's an important story because it's talking about something that was at the time really difficult for people to talk about. But I also think it's a really interestingly told story because of the characterization. Like the characters are just especially the poet mother, and also the main character, or the person telling the story, which is Owen, the son. And I think those two characters in particular are very well drawn by the author. The way that this book, the one thing that was sort of like a bit of a negative for me was that the way that the book is told, or the narration is kind of structured, is it's Owen talking to his aunt Ornella. And I don't think that really worked. And I think the reason that it didn't work is because Aunt Ornella, her story isn't that focal in the book. And, she sort of comes in and out of the story, and she's there and she's important, but her story isn't kind of like central to the book. So the fact that he's talking to her is never really explained as to why he's doing that. Yeah. And also he sort of talks about her like she was almost sort of a mother to him as well. And that didn't come across, I think, as the author potentially intended it. I don't think that was super clear, other than Ornella taking care of him a lot when he was a child. But the relationship between them wasn't close in the sense that you would expect a mother and child, or a mother-like figure and child to be. I don't know. It just didn't quite work for me. Other than that, though, I loved this book. There were everything else about this book I loved. And, as sort of things are revealed about why she's sort of a bad mother, and also why she sort of ends up getting cancelled, I guess. That's really fascinating, that story, and like what happens in the aftermath of that. Was a really, really good book. So yeah, I'd really recommend Bad Art Mother. I thought it was really, really good. So yeah, like I've had a pretty up and down reading month, I would say, because I've had some real highs and then I've also had some real lows this month. But yeah, I've read a decent amount, which was good. I'm pleased with the number of books that I read this month, and I'm pleased that I was able to get through most of the Stella shortlist. I'm still working on Hydra. That was the last one that I didn't quite get done, and I'm enjoying it to a degree, but yeah, my head just hasn't really been in the place for reading. I do have one book from May that I have already finished, so I'll talk about that when I get to my May wrap up, but yeah, it could be the only one. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. All right. So that's it. That's my wrap up for the month of April. Thanks so much for watching, and I will catch you on the next one. Bye.